Okay. First of all, I want to just apologize for Larry for not being here because he's sick. He and his wife came back from a trip to New Zealand and she got sick just before they came back. Larry thought he dodged the bullet and got very unfeeling well last night. So he doesn't sound like himself right now. So he respectfully decided to bag out. So why we're doing this is that there's a lot of questions about how do we deal with air combat in particular. And as Larry and I went through these questions and then drafted the answers, and one of the nice things is once this is all done and we clean it up, we can have Peter post it on this on the questions page so you guys can get them in writing, so you don't have to worry about writing them all down. The big thing we saw is there's a fundamental philosophical difference on the issue of control. Um, Many of the players' questions, they want control pre-detection, and the rules just won't let you do that. There's a reason for that. The player sees everything on the game surface. You have far more information of extremely high quality than you have any right to. And they wanted to jiggle the approach. The guy in the airplane doesn't have that point of view. And the rules are pushing you into the cockpit. And there's a resistance to this. And I can understand that. That's, we're the evil game designers. I mean, really. So what you're going to see is a lot of pushback on us to limit the player's control on what they can do before they're really allowed to do anything. And then we'll talk about where you can futz with that a little bit. So let's start with the first question, which came from Martin Kelly, where he talked about a Su-30 MKK coming over the hill against a modern Aegis ship at 20 miles. And he wanted to know, well, how would we do this? Because aircraft don't have a combat system and they don't have a reaction rule. Well, my answer is wrong table, Martin. The air combat is in chapter 8. That's all it is for ships to shoot at airplanes, largely, and for airplanes to shoot at airplanes with missiles. To attack a surface ship, you've got to go use the table on page 6.3, where we specifically say what an aircraft gets in terms of a benefit. And what that is that an aircraft has an inordinate amount of flexibility once you detect the guy. So that's the big thing, is that wrong table. If you look at the range at which you get a good solution, an aircraft in the turn of detection can have a good solution, which means you can fire virtually immediately. And we'll address why there are some issues. People have had issues with when can they shoot. So to answer Martin's question is wrong table, go to 6.3, not 8.4. Okay, the next one was by Dylan Jones. Actually, most of these are by Dylan Jones. And he wants to know, how do we do the sequence to resolve a missile attack? Hi, Martin. I just threw you under the bus. No problems there, lad. There's been a debate on this between the design group. And we initially went with, you need to use the detection of the missile that's coming in as to when you do it. I mean, some missiles have very long detection ranges. They're big, they have great big arrays. They can see them. Here's the problem I have with making a die roll at that point. The target probably has not deployed countermeasures. They don't last very long. And if you look at tactical guidelines, particularly the Russians have published some of theirs. They expect the missile to get far, far closer before it has to worry about countermeasures like chaff, flares, or even some jamming involved. So what we're falling back to is that the lock-on roll or to hit roll is going to be made in the short range band after the last missile has had its attack, the defensive missile. And here's why we're going to do that. If I roll it, say, 50 miles, because I've got a great big honking Russian missile with a huge dome, and it gets, quote, distracted or decoyed. One, as I said, the decoys aren't up. And two, that missile's got a whole bunch more time to try to figure out the ship from the decoy. I do not want multiple to hit or to lock rolls. So we're going to go down to one, and it's going to be at the end of the short range band. You will roll then, and then point defenses come up. And then here's the next part of the debate. Can the ship determine if the missile's been decoyed? The answer is, it depends. And I'm not certain we're going to go down this route or not, but if you have generation 1 through 4, the answer is no. You do not have time to determine that a missile is going to miss you. So you have to shoot at the bunch. Maybe Gen 5 and Gen 6 in automatic could make that determination. But I'm not sure Larry wants to go down that path of making finer cuts on how those things work. So for the purposes of when do you roll for anti-ship missile attack? After the last short-range SAM shot's been made. Okay, the next one, Dylan says that missiles are not valid targets unless they move away from a launch platform in the next movement phase. Does this mean you can't detect them? Yes, in the current term, you cannot detect them. The missile has dropped from the pylon. It is on cosmic hold. It hasn't moved away from the aircraft, which means as far as the radar is concerned, it is in the same resolution cell and you cannot differentiate. Visually, there's nothing for you to tell. I mean, when the motor kicks off, yeah, you'll see it. But until that point, you're not going to. So if the guy fires in the movement phase of, say, turn 4, you're not going to see it until turn 5. Here's the next one. Dylan asks is that only shipboard weapons that can fire in the reaction fire phase. Initially, we were looking that it was going to be just shipboard, but there has been a fair strong debate going on that to solve a lot of the problems you guys seem to be having, aircraft need to be able to shoot in reaction fire phase, especially as I pointed out that within a certain range on table on page 6.3, an aircraft can shoot in the term of detection. So since detection comes after planned fire, that means they've got to be able to have reaction fire. So that will be codified. Aircraft will have reaction fire. Okay. Dylan asked about stepped aircraft movement. When can I do detection? Okay. Like I said earlier, you shouldn't be in stepped movement if you have not detected. Step movement is to allow you to react. In this case, I think Dylan is trying to exercise more control than he should have. If you don't know someone's there, if the guy in the cockpit doesn't know someone's there, but the player does, then the guy in the cockpit will be restricted. Okay, that's the biggest thing. You go to step movement when you are reacting to something. That means you've detected something, not before. Now, if you are in stepped movement and something else occurs, then yes, it's a move, detect, fire sequence for every increment. Okay, what's the next one? Okay, here's a nice one. Martin, you asked about LPI mode. We dropped the ball on this. This is what happened. On those radars that are specifically designed just to be LPI, we factored that into the range. We completely dropped the ball on regular radars that have an LPI mode. So, no, you're not going to see, either one's not going to see it at 60 miles. Not happening. What is happening is that you are reducing the amount of power that's being transmitted. So, and it's being spread out over your duty cycle. Now, a radar duty cycle is its pulse width times its pulse repetition frequency. And you're spreading the radar's peak power out overall across that. So, for example, an SPS 48 can, ditch out 1.25 megawatts, but it's doing that for 1,000 pulses that are 27 microseconds long. So the effective power of the pulse is not 1.25 megawatts. It's just 33.7 kilowatts. Okay, little bit order of magnitude change here. And it's the pulse power that goes into the radar equation. So when you go to LPI mode, you are not transmitting anywhere near maximum power. If you look at the Scout radar, its power settings are like 10 milliwatts, 100 milliwatts, and 1 watt. Okay, that's what LPI is about, is keeping the power level down so that ESM has, or ES sensors have a hard time detecting it. We did not capture that in the rules, and we're going to be working on that. But for a thumb rule for you guys to play with, if you are in LPI mode, the range is divided by 4. It's 1/4. So in Martin's thing here, the 055 can detect a small target then at 44 miles. And the MH60R won't see the 055 till 14 miles. So yeah, that's going to be a very big difference. Of course, Martin, I gotta ask, what the hell is an MH60R doing hand-to-hand combat with a 055 all by itself? Okay.
Okay, I'm here. Okay, what are you looking for me to say? I mean, that's very interesting. I didn't know that about the LPI, and it'll certainly change the way that I play it. So,
Oh yeah, LPI is a two-edged sword. It keeps you from being detected by ES systems, but it really brings in your ability to detect anybody. And I just did a back of the envelope using some of the surface search radars that I've got at least some decent data for, and that's where the 25% down to 25% of listed range came from. It could be less, I just need to sit down and look at it.
Yeah. Thanks for answering that. That certainly helps. Okay.
Okay, the next question was from Dylan about the targeting complexes get a plus to their ES multiplier. Does this include aircraft mounted surface search radars? If what you're talking about is does the SST able to detect aircraft radars? The answer is if the aircraft radar is in the very low altitude band, yeah, it could kind of be. It gets down to a question of where does the frequencies work out? But yeah, it potentially could be. Aircraft, just to answer a question that I think comes out later, aircraft cannot use the duct, period. They're not sure where it is, except that they know it's really low. And they don't have the resolution in their systems to be able to use it either for active or passive. So I'm covering both potential questions here. The next one was on magnetic anomaly detector in a wide area MAD search. I'm hoping Dylan does realize this is called a search of last resort, because it's really pretty bad. But here's the problem. If you look at the way MAD is run as a localization sensor, it presupposes a detection. If you don't have a detection and you're using MAD, the best thing that will do for you is say there was a magnetic anomaly. That's not a fire control solution. It's just a cue that you've had a detection of something. And if you're an evil, wicked game master, in particularly shallow areas where there was lots of World War II combat, the false alarm rate should be hideous. That's why the Russians didn't like doing it. It was very ineffectual. So no, you do not get a good solution. You don't even get a poor. All you get is there was something there. And then you have to start over and start doing your dropping your sonobuoy patterns or trying to run some more wide area searching. Good luck with that. Okay, the next one is what altitude are SSMs fired as surface-to-surface missiles considered to be at? This is a place where Larry and I are not in agreement. Larry believes that SAMs, as SSMs are described in, he said section 4.7, but I think he meant page 4.7, which says they use a direct flight path, and that means they fly at low altitude. I'm kind of pushing back on that a little bit because my response would be direct flight at the lowest engagement and altitude capable of the missile. Because we have a lot of missiles that are VLO capable. Yeah, they're kind of flying a little bit of a arc trajectory, but we need to resolve that. But for now, it's low. Larry and I need to work on that because I think it could be low or VLO. Okay, Dylan then asked about artillery fire against ships. Does the artillery need to have its own visual contact, or can they rely on a spotting team? Artillery can use a spotting team. It is still indirect fire. It doesn't, your chance of hit sucks. He next asks, does the 35-minute line of limit for non-over-the-horizon systems apply to aircraft firing control? Okay, guys, what part of an airplane up high makes that over the horizon? That's why an airplane has the advantage. It is above the horizon. Okay? Especially when you're talking, you can make a detection and go straight to attack as far out as 50 miles Okay, I just don't think Dylan understands the rule. 35 miles is because the curvature of the Earth bugs a surface ship. Aircraft don't have anywhere near the same problem. So, no, the 35 mile doesn't really apply to airplanes. Dylan asks, is a placement role required for bearing only launch? Yes. BOL has been described as a poor solution. Of course, you're going to roll. Dylan then asks, if you have two mounts and one is destroyed, does that have any impact on your AAA factor? Okay, guys, really? Yes, it does. And if you want, you can figure it out with the individual gun A ratings. You just ratio it. You know, if you had two guns, you lose one, your AA rating is halved. Move on. Dylan then asked about visual sensor. He wants to know if we use any of the modifiers. Do they apply to visual targets? No, they don't. You use the table without modifiers. You then asked about tactical data links. When we say is reduced the level and quality, he says, does that refer to the generation or to the good, fair, whatever? It refers to good, fair, poor. It is not a degradation of the technical aspect of the ship. It's just a degradation of the quality of the solution or improvement in the case of a data link. Dylan did ask some questions that, if, I got really crappy jammers and decoys, do I have to use both jammers and decoys if it's going to be beneficial to the missile? No, you can just use decoys, and you can plot it as just using decoys. In which case you're using the D column, not the J and D column. If an aircraft is firing an air-to-air missile at a sea-skimming target, do I take a to-hit modifier? Good question. Not sure. We're going to have to look at that one. Part of the issue with surface-fired missiles is not so much that you can't see the target. It's the fact that they're starting down low, that their fusing can be initiated by wave slap. Is this the same problem with an air-to-air missile? Not sure. So the general feeling right now is that if you're doing and this is radar air-to-air missiles, okay? We're not letting you shoot IR missiles at other missiles. Not happening. There right now is no modifier for sea skimmer because the missile is coming down on the target and you're not having the same fusing issues. So, but we really need to nail that one down a bit. Okay, there was a question of after a dogfight, the rules say you must return to base. Okay, Larry's view is that historically, this is what usually happens. And for simplicity's sake of the rules, it works. My response is, if you're leaving a dogfight, either one that you accepted or you got stuck with, usually when one leaves a dogfight, it's because you've been in one and you're now gone with your weapons are done, and you may have some fuel concerns. In that case, yeah, you're going to return to base. Now, if you get caught in a dogfight and you go through a single iteration and you can escape because you really didn't want to be there, then I would say you probably don't need to do that. But it's going to be basically gets down to you got stuck in a dogfight, but you really didn't dogfight. You just wanted to run away. So we're going to have to work on that to give you some benefits. But if you get into a dogfight, you expend ordnance and you're running around, yes, you go back home. Okay. Martin asked a question about if you're in increment movements, when does the ship move? Um, if you are using increments to resolve a full tactical turn, the ship will execute its full movement in increment 3. For the most part, just clearing your weapons arcs is usually not that big a deal. Presenting a little more of presenting less of a cross section becomes more of a problem, I think. So if you're doing 6 turns, 6 increments, on increment 3, move the ship. Okay, Dylan then asked a question that if we're using 30-second for air movement, when can a warship deter an air target? Okay, I'm going to get back to the thing I've been beating on, guys. You go to 30-second increments when a detection has already been made. You are reacting to the detection. If something comes after you've already gone into the tactical increment mode, then go ahead and do the move, detect, and then when you can, shoot, because it's going to be different from the ship. And that's what whole chapter 8's about, on how a ship does it. Okay. What I would say is do not go into 30-second movements just prior to detection. That is too much control in the hands of the player, and it's information the pilot of the aircraft does not have. If you need to work your way up to detection, I would say use proportional movement at 1-minute intervals. Once you get a detection, then you can go drop into 30-second increments if you need to. Okay, the next one. You only asked about stepped movement in V low. If you drop down, come back up, drop down. The answer is if you are in V low at any time in a tactical turn, whether it's 1 increment or the whole turn, you do 1 die roll to see if you kiss Mother Earth. Dylan then asks, is only guided air to surface weapons with a cruise flight profile required to have a fire control solution? No. If you want to hit, you need to know where the guy's going to be. So if it's a glide, or in some cases ballistic, like a laser guided bomb, yeah, you do need to have a solution. Now here's the kicker. Most of these events, you're within 50 miles of the target, which means you go within the same tactical turn, you go from detection to attack. So it's kind of moot, really. But yes, you do require to have a fire control solution to be able to do if you want to attack effectively. He then asks, is it really the case that only 3rd gen EOIR missiles can attack moving ships? We are changing the rules that, and it'll show up in the next sit rep, that an EO weapon may attack a moving ship at half its normal range as long as it also has a guidance link. If it's just a glide bomb going out there and it doesn't have a link, the answer is no. Can't hit a moving ship. You got to be able, the attacking aircraft has to be able to tell the weapon where to go. Next one. Line 9, or the line in 9.6 only refers to weapon placement roll. It says nothing about fire control solutions. And Larry's response is, You look at the left-hand column in the bottom of page 97, it says they require a fire control solution. So yes, you need to have one. So then Dylan asks, aircraft can detect and react instantly in a mini detection phase in a 30-second increment. Right? I'm going to pound again. If you don't have a detection, no, you are not in 30-second increments. If you have a detection, then yes, it's a mini phase. And the reaction time is, we were looking at having you guys be able to use reaction fires, or at least I was. I think it just got lost. So if you're in increments, an aircraft can launch weapons the increment after it has made a detection. So if you detect in the third increment, you may let your ordnance loose on the fourth. And then the last posted question was from Martin about what's going on over in the Red Sea, where a Burke had to engage only with, or it shot down a missile with phalanx. Well, yeah, that can happen. Remember, you still got to make your reaction time die roll. And Aegis can screw up. So it's entirely possible you could lose both the short range SAM shots if you were particularly unfortunate. And you could just miss on the other one. So we do not see a need to change the rules here. The other thing I would point out, and this is not something we specifically have in the rules, although I might put an optional one in the sit rep. Weapon systems don't, or combat systems don't normally hang out in automatic. That's Terminator mode. If it sees something that meets its requirements, it's going to shoot. Yes, the crew has command by negation, but the computer's faster. So most times, particularly in dense environments, these systems are going to be in human control, which means they're really not much all that better than a fourth gen combat system because you're putting people involved. And that's where you really start getting some interesting problems. Like I said, that's something I will probably mention in the upcoming sit rep, so that it becomes a command in the plotting phase as to what status your fire control system is in. And if you're an auto and a friendly helicopter comes by, you're going to shoot it. All righty. Does that answer it for you, Martin? Okay. Yeah, of course he does.
I just want to make that's a great point, and I think it was someone called Javi brought that up. The difference in the the system between auto and human mode. It's not something I'd seen or understood in the rules before. So that clarification was great. Thanks very much.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, it's not currently in the rules, but I will be putting mention this because we had this come up in a convention, and a friendly airplane took great umbrage when the Aegis destroyer shot it. Yeah, we could, let's stick to harpoon rules first, and then if we run out, I'll let you sneak in some of the others. There was one other thing I saw that Martin talked about with, I think, zircon, and you're talking about its speed and its impact on the modifiers. Here's the problem with Russian reporting on zircon. Every subsequent senior report out of Russia, the range and speed have gotten bigger for the last several years. Here's where we have the problem. Zircon apparently has two flight trajectories. There's cruise, and then there's something the Russians call semi-ballistic. What you see in the rules right now is cruise mode, which means it's got a range of about 400, 500 kilometers at Mach 5 to 6. In semi-ballistic mode, it's a short-range ballistic missile that could have up to 800 to 1,000 kilometers, and its maximum speed, and this is before it gets to perigee, is about Mach 8 to Mach 9. But after that, it's coasting. So like a short-range ballistic missile, it is not hypersonic at the time of attack. He's muted. Well, I know who this is.
I'm going to ask about Sweden in World War II. So take it back.
Thank God.
At least not now. We'll wait till you get to Command at Sea.
Oh,
But my question is, when you do your sit reps, and I know this is hard because every situation is different, but a lot of these situations, have you guys given thought to like doing like the jumpstart rules, kind of like a little like 2 or 3 page discuss, like to step through something? You know, like advanced squad leader would do this a lot in their rule books, like give you an example of how you would step through something. You know, as these topics get more complex.
The problem we have, John, is just doing a rule in isolation tends not to be all that clarifying. So we try to do a situation that highlights a number of rules, and that tends to make a big product.
Right.
See how
That's yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, we have an idea to do a couple of others, particularly in air engagement, and then one related to ASW, to just try and walk folks through it, because ASW is harder just because it's sonar is a pain, and then aircraft are hard because of how fast they move, and our timing sequence, and more importantly, our distance breakdowns do not really work well for air-to-air combat. If you look at air superiority, or even speed of heat, which is, it's both J.D. Webster.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at his time sequence is 12 seconds.
Right.
But his distance is 1/3 of a mile.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way we can do that.
Right.
So you're going to have abstracted air combat.
Right, and
Um,
that's the reason why I think having like a little demonstration of the abstraction would be helpful to people.
okay.
It would be
Well,
helpful to me when I'm going through it. Or like something like even as simple as something like World War II depth charge, like a destroyer attacking a submarine with depth charges or a hedgehog, how
mhm.
stepping through that process, like how far away, the whole interaction between the picking up it on the sonar and how far away it's going to be. I haven't been very successful in doing that. It was one of the reasons I'm asking in
Well,
that particular.
depth charges are pretty easy. You run over the top.
Right, but you got to pick them up with the sonar, and then you lose it,
Yes,
and then that whole
yes,
process. So
yeah, yeah. There's a reason why.
you can't go that
Starting,
fast because you lose the contact.
and
Yes.
that's why John Walker came up with the tack that he did, where he had one guy, one ship hold contact and direct the others over them.
Hmm.
So what you're seeing is, I think maybe more frustration of just how difficult it is to do it. Yeah, it's hard, but we can walk that through. That's actually not that hard for me. It wouldn't be that hard to write.
The last question I have, Command at Sea again. Sorry, but I can't help. No. It's kind of Harpoon 5-ish because I've been kind of using the Harpoon 5 rules to explore the kamikaze problem with detection and how quickly you can react with those, the 1940s type things.
Yes, but
And it's
here's
making and the kamikaze problem is making a lot more sense now, basically.
yeah, basically in CAS, which we're now pulling in a bunch of stuff from Harpoon, putting it into Command at Sea. One of those things is going to be fighter direction,
Hmm.
that sort of.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
Here's the problem: you don't have a combat system.
Right. Yes. Yeah, that's the
You,
problem.
you've got a guy with a grease pencil, and here's the other problem. Um, I mean, we walked away with being able to tell a target size on radar because it's really freaking hard, and a lot of people says, oh, well, that's a small pip. Yeah, if he's pointing his bow towards you, it is. If
Right.
he's not, it gets bigger. I mean, if you look at how so these sort of things are just in World War II, they only got a blip. Now that blip could be one airplane, it could be 10 or 20. They got saturated. So not only am I going to have to give you delay, but you're going to get, you can only handle X number.
And you
then,
have altitude problems too, because a lot of the ships don't have height finders. So you don't
well,
even know where. Yeah.
we don't care about that. They got to come to me. The only time I worry about
Well,
height finders is when I'm directing fighters. Otherwise, they're
right.
coming
Yeah.
to me, and
Yeah.
my shells will find them as they close. But yeah, we're putting some of that in. The kamikaze problem is going to be ugly.
Yes. That's it for me.
Okay, Javi's got something. Oh, and so does Spiz. Okay. All right.
Hello, thank you very much. You were talking about the problem of we don't leave the ships in autonomous killbot mode because they'd start shooting at friendly helicopters and such. But I have players that don't, that always do stupid things. So what sort?
Never underestimate the intelligence of a player, or overestimate. I don't know.
Yeah. So, could you give some examples of the sorts of things that the computer might find threatening enough to engage? Because I might drop that on them if they persist in being overly aggressive with their rules of engagement.
Okay, one of the things you can do is you can make them preset doctrine. And what I mean by that is this. At what speed does the air target get your attention? And how many weapons will you fire? 1 or 2? You make them write that down. If they have an air contact that meets their speed requirement, they will shoot the number of missiles that they've set up. If you have a contact that comes in that's slower, it will not engage. So kind of constraints like that is the way to force them to pre-think their air engagement doctrine. Now, in the Aegis combat system, these options are already pretty well done, and you just punch a couple of buttons, and it's over. But if you go into automatic killbot mode, as you called it, or what I call the Terminator mode, you're going to start ripple launching missiles. As far as the combat system's concerned, it's a missile in the tube, I can shoot it. So there's a real reason to be careful.
Thanks a lot. Right, and I'll pass the floor over to Javi.
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Gotcha, Javi.
Oh, fantastic. First things first, obligatory, thank you very much for all the cool work on Harpoon and all the associated products. Had to kick off with that. I've got a couple of questions regarding the kind of the rules. One's a bigger one, one's a bit of a curiosity. So my main one is with regards to I guess the best way to word it is if you ever were, are you going to look at perhaps the idea of fighter cockpit generation, I guess you could call it, in the same way that you could combat systems for ships. So the difference, I guess it's as you go forward with things like the F-35 and all like that, the advance in the cockpits, your glass cockpit versus your dials and such, and the advantage that gives the pilot in terms of reaction time and being able to acquire and fire and just deal with threats just significantly faster than a pilot with a less advanced cockpit. Is there ever, I guess, a world where there could be sort of rules for that, or is it just kind of too nitty gritty for the level of abstraction, I guess?
Here's the problem. It's our time sequence and our distance measurements that we're using. Your point makes a great deal if I'm down to, say, 5-second intervals. I mean, if you've ever played SPI Air War with 2.5-second movements, yeah, then it becomes an issue. What we do with the abstraction, it's the number of engagements that you can do. So we tell you how many you can shoot, and then how many you can shoot within an increment. And when you get into dogfighting, we really don't care. I mean, that's what the whole dogfight's about. We don't want to deal with that. So in terms of combat system for aircraft, it has more to deal with how many engagements you can do, and to some degree, which we plug into the radar, is your electronic countermeasures. After that, the only time we really care about fire control is in dropping air to surface ordnance that's not guided.
Yeah, and that's where the bomb site kind of modifier comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. I just wanted to ask. My other kind of sort of question, I guess, and this is more of an odd case that I had happen recently, and I just kind of sort of wanted your advice on it. So I was basically, when the Commonwealth book came out, was mucking around with the rules for a bit. I did this interesting scenario, which was basically sort of, kind of like a what if, F-35s dropping Spear 3 on a variety of targets. And I came to this odd situation where you managed to hit, I think it was the Liaoning, I can't remember anymore, but the point is, managed to hit a target with 7 or so strikes. And the damage itself from the strikes was relatively minimal, and the ship was fine. but the accrued fire critical hits from the multiple strikes basically led to an immediate mission kill for the ship. And I just kind of, and I guess sort of my question is that realistic, or is that more of a quirk of the rules?
You know, you're talking about a missile pod, right? Or rocket pod.
No. So for example, in the case of the F-35 carrying 8 spears or 16 externally, your F-35B types. If you've got a flight of say 12 or whatever, then you're launching a really massive number of really small missiles. And so if you manage to land 6 or so hits, that leads to then sort of 6 or 7 fire criticals on that ship. So even though the overall damage is in the fire critical just goes really, really high, really quickly.
Did you get to the minimum damage required for a critical hit?
Well, for the hits, for some of them, yes. I guess that's sort of my question. If you don't, then does that apply the fire? And where does the critical hit for the missile work in?
If you don't make the minimum for a critical hit, minimum damage for a critical hit, you just apply the, few damage points and you're done.
And the critical hit apply. That makes perfect sense.
Yes. That's why that rule was there, is to keep somebody with, small caliber guns from sinking an aircraft carrier.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. Those were my couple of questions. I shall leave to whoever else wants to ask. Thank you very much for that.
Mm-hmm. No, we can. It works. Yeah, it works best when there's a general consensus that there's some confusion. I mean, if you're just having little tit for tat discussions about things, now this isn't a good use of time. But if there's a consensus that there's some confusion, then yeah, I think it would be a good, and we just kind of do it as it happens. Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm not going to work on that. That's yeah. All right. We can open it up to any question on the ATG side in terms of games. If you've got other specific questions, go ahead. I'm not seeing a lot of harpoon related leftovers. Oh, of course. Yeah, there you go. Self-inflicted wound.
Still not Sweden. But I do have
You're
a
never
question.
going to let that go, are you?
Never, not until it shows up. No.
All right. God bless it. Fine.
But armor. So I'm doing a lot of ship logs that go across years and stuff like that, and I'm looking at a lot of data from other sources and stuff like that. Some of the sources you guys use, and I see like things that the smearing of the armor. Like, is there a calculation for that somewhere? Like how you get that?
Yeah, it's a weighted average. We actually put that in a sit rep.
Oh, you did?
A while
okay.
back.
Yeah. All right. I didn't see. I looked and I didn't see anything, so I'll have to look again.
All right. If you can't find it, just send me an email. It's a weighted average. The bulk is of course the belt. And in this case, with most ships, it's the lower belt. And the reason why I did lower belt and not the upper belt is because the upper belt armor, after the shell goes through it, it's still got to go through the deck to inflict a critical hit. So I just said, screw it. It's lower belt and we're done. After that, it's turret face, which depends on how many turrets you have, steering, and conning tower.
Okay.
But for the most part, if you need a real quick, that looks about right, just take the belt as the vertical armor and the overall deck as the horizontal. It's going to
And
be
you have in
higher
that
than one
article,
another.
in that article, you also discussed the different armors, right? Like what the ratio is between them.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
I'll have to
Yeah.
find it.
Yeah, like I said, if you can't, just let me know and I'll help you with it.
All right, thank you. I think that's it.
Okay. Okay, if no one else has notes.
Yeah. Hello again. Yeah. I joined the chat a bit late because I got very late up from work today, so I apologize if this has been covered before. So please tell me. The other one we had a bit of a discussion the other day about the chain of kind of sort of the layers of defense when a ship is defending from a missile. So obviously the missile's coming in, you roll your reaction, then missiles start to fire. Then once you get to that, then you're left to point defense and you're left to soft kill. And then the question that we kind of had is whether you roll for soft kill or you roll for guns first.
Okay, yeah, this was covered. Let me just give you a quick rundown. We initially were looking at making the quote to hit or lock on roll early,
Mhm.
earlier, based on the seeker of the missile. Myself and a couple others started pulling back on that because long range detection does not necessarily coincide with deployment of countermeasures because they don't
Mhm.
last very long. So what we decided to go to is that short range and further out missile fire occurs first. At the end of the short range missile fire, the to hit roll is made, and then you have point defenses. But here's the problem. For most of the generation of combat systems, the difference in bearing rate will not be discernible. So you're engaging the whole cluster, including the ones that are going to miss you.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's
What
and
Larry,
is that, no, sorry, go on.
what Larry and I haven't decided yet is whether or not Gen 6 and Gen 5 in automatic can make that determination.
Okay. Yeah, decide whether it is or isn't going to hit.
And you can
That
pick
makes
only
sense.
the ones that are coming at you. But we're still trying to tweak with that, but that gives another reason for why automatic is important. Because if you're not in auto, then if you're in 5th or 6th gen human, you're just like a Gen 4. Because the human is the limiting factor.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you very much for that.
Mm-hmm. Either you just can't get away from these guys.
Oh, it could be. I could be here all night.
Oh, please don't.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to say about that, realistically, if the human is involved in this, they see a missile coming, they're shooting decoys off no matter what. They would not even if it's
No, John. That's not the way it
no.
works. If you have a missile seeker at 50 miles, you are not rapid firing your expendables because you don't have a lot of those.
Oh, okay.
And see, and then
But
I had then
don't
we had,
they take us? Don't they take time to deploy though to like create a
yeah,
bloom?
yeah. That's why we timed their effectiveness to be at the short range band when they're about 6-7 miles out.
Okay.
Before they get into point defense. Because here's the other problem. If I deploy those countermeasures while the guy's further away, the missile has more time to look at you. So
Okay,
we would have to incorporate multiple die rolls. Can you say no way, Jose?
okay. All right.
And truly, the last one.
Terribly sorry. It's a somewhat related question. I'm reading a lot of documentation for the time. I see references to standard missile ships having some sort of searchlight mode on their illuminators, and it's often referred to as custom mode, where you would
That's not a
simply.
search. That's not a searchlight mode specifically. It's a wide beam mode.
So,
And basically what it does is they illuminate a volume, which means the power being returned by a particular from a particular aircraft is lower. So yeah, you can do that, but it's going to drop your ATA value.
nice. Yes, because I've been wondering how to model it. They refer to just cycling the launchers as fast as possible and just throwing missiles at the target.
As one former commanding officer of a Aegis destroyer said, it's better to throw missiles away than let them be sunk with the ship.
Yeah, I was just wondering how to model that, but
At one point in time, we had the custer mode in the rules. I'll have to go look at it. Off the top of my head, it was a pretty hefty penalty on the ATA value.
thanks.
You know, so if you want to play with it, take like 2 off, and then I'd have to go back and check.
Oh, thanks a lot anyway.
Well, one of the things you can do, Peter, is you can sample the Discord. I don't get on as much as I would like to because I'm too darn busy doing other stuff. Is see if there's a general topic, and then we can announce the topic, give them a couple of weeks to write the questions, and then we do this. All right, good night.